Hey everybody, and welcome back to TT Plays. Today we're going to go through Flesh and Blood's Iyslander, and we're mainly going to be talking about her sideboard. So this is a pretty typical Bowlander deck, and I'm not going to go into too much about the core of the deck. The core of the deck here that we have up on Fabrary, which is a phenomenal site. Michael Hamilton, other people way better than him than I have kind of done this ad nauseum. So I'm mainly going to focus on the sideboard. We were able to use this to win a recent RTN. So yeah, pretty happy with it in general. Took it to one RTN, we won it. The other RTNs I went to, I played Kano. We made one top 8 there, and then we bubbled out at 10th in the other ones. Each event had over 44 people, so decent showings at all of them. Nothing amazing. Again, for a local event, that's pretty good. So if you want to know more about the general Iyslander deck, I recommend you go check out Michael Hamilton's podcast, Ethnic Smoke. They both have great content about it. Really, though, the sideboard is a representation of a reaction to the meta, right? And the meta for the time of doing this was definitely Lexi on top. I know we have some new heroes coming out, and we can talk about each one of them too. Bolton is inherently card disadvantage. Should be fine. The new Runeblade also looks like card disadvantage. We should be fine, meaning our tax effects just have a larger impact on them. We've tended to have a good Viscerai matchup to begin with. Leviah is interesting. We typically don't have a good Brute matchup, but it depends on how you build Leviah. I really like Leviah. Shout out Mansant. So you can build her still around Blood Rush Bellows. There's also some thought in the community about ditching Blood Rush Bellows. Anyway, we'll see what kind of comes out of that. But right, Lexi's at the top of the meta, and she's kind of dictating the sideboard here. So let's run through the sideboard. I'm not going to give you the ins and the outs. Like, we bring this in for Lexi, we bring this out for Lexi, but I am going to talk about why these are in the sideboard. My theory is if you can understand the purpose of the card, you can make your own sideboarding judgments, and you're going to have better luck with them than just blindly following some deck list you got from some jabroni on YouTube. So, starting off, we have Command and Conquer. This is really to attack anyone running New Horizon with that double arsenal spot. And we're going to pair that down here with Goliath Gauntlets, right? I've been bullish about how good these are. My teammate Jay swears up and down it's more damage, just run these. And I've liked them more and more now, right? When we look at Iyslander now compared to 6 months ago, we're not seeing our pitch stack consistently. We're basically a tempo deck. It doesn't really hurt us to go second because we want to get tempo. So Goliath Gauntlets presenting a CNC for 8 really puts a New Horizon double arsenal person in an interesting situation. Do I take 8, lose 2 cards? Do I block with 3 cards to preserve my arsenal and give up a lot of tempo? So there's some really interesting decisions there, and that's why we're running 3 Command and Conquers in addition to this Goliath Gauntlet. Command and Conquer is also just a good red card to bring into some other matchups as well. If we value that 3 block, maybe more than just the 2 block off the Findle's Fighting Spirit, and then of course it attacks and it pops. So it's just a good, high quality, very expensive card that we add to the deck. Encase, again, is pulling double duty. It's good into a couple different matchups. It's good into Lexi. Lexi traditionally was only bringing AB2. Note, that's before the Bullseye Bracer ban. It'll be interesting if we see more Shock Charmers. Maybe Lexi goes a little bit more ice related after this. But either way, shutting off Snapdragons, and more importantly, her hero ability is pretty important. In addition to sending damage, possibly getting that fuse for the Insidious Chill trigger allows for an easy Waning Moon, right? 2 cards, you present 5 damage on your turn between the Encase plus the Waning Moon. I will also mention this card is really clutch into Dromai. Now, at a high level, Dromai has a hard time stopping Arcane Barrier because they run a relatively speaking small amount of blues. This also shuts off Furnace, which they tend to use for a lot of tricks again, cracking Frostbites, getting them the resources they need. So this will shut that off. But more importantly, it's 3 damage to any target. We can pair that with Metacarpus Nodes, and that allows us to get to 4 damage, which is really the key number for a couple dragons who are a pain in our butts, namely Thamai and Miragi. So again, Encase kind of pulls double duty for us into Lexi and Dromai. Scar for Scar is in the sideboard. This is probably the closest we have to a main board card down here in the sideboard. It's basically like, do you anticipate over the course of the game your ability to stay under your opponent's life total? Obviously, there's some great 3 cards hand for Scar, right? We can go Scar for Scar to CNC. We go Scar for Scar to Wounded Bull, anything like that. We can also just go Scar for Scar to Coronet Peak, right? That's 4 damage, plus it mandates that they discard or pay 1. So, you know, we get a card out of them, we deal 4 damage. That's a really good 2-card hand as far as I'm concerned. So, Scar for Scar is close to being in every matchup. Again, if I'm worried about the life total gain, like if I think my opponent is going to be below me in life totals, I'm going to pull Scar for Scar out. That might be like Kano. It might be a weird Iyslander mirror. So those are the situations I would pull Scar out. Sink Below, again, just another really generic, ubiquitous card. For the Artian, Oldhim was still in rotation. I knew there would be a couple Bravos there as well, solid into both of those. It's really clean into Katsu. It allows us to kind of cleanly block some of their Gust Wave. I don't remember the name of their cards. I'm not even going to try to say it. It's Gust Wave. It draws them a card. We need to stop it. So Sink Below is a clean card there. Aether Icevein Yellow, for me personally, is almost a main deck card. And this is going to be a lot of your personal preference. A friend of mine said that Iyslander gives you a lot of space for personal expression, whether you want to prioritize that kind of arcane damage or more the physical damage. I really like Yellow Icevein. It tends to punch over, so they're looking at A being 3, right? Taking 1 damage and then giving you 2 more resources, so it's functionally giving you 2 blues. They could, of course, obviously just take the 4, probably take 3, give you a blue to prevent 1, and then the 2 behind it. I really love Aether Icevein for a tempo card. I value this card very highly. It does also do 4 damage to any target. We talked about the value of Encase coming in with Metacarpus Node there. Aether Icevein is great for a finisher there. I will say that we do have Channel Bleak in this list, and we'll get to that in a little. Obviously, if we have Channel Bleak, do I want Aether Icevein? But I value this card very highly. If you don't love it, that's fine. It's completely up to you. We do have to take a lot of damage on our opponent's turn to pivot back to this, right? Because we either need to arsenal this card or we need to roll back to our Karn with a 3-card hand, right? Because we need a blue to pitch to Icevein. We need the fuse here. Ideally, we arsenal whatever it is we fused with. So we do have to take some damage in order to use the Icevein, but I personally love this card. Blizzard. So Iyslander kind of unlocks true Blizzard, not this petty Oldhim Blizzard, right? We're going to ask you for a full blue because of the triggered Frostbite in order to get going in on something. So any deck that's planning on going wide on you, we want to use Blizzard. It's important here that while sometimes taking a blue out of their hand but then continuing their turns is fine, we ideally want to stop their turns completely. There are basically 3 different times where we can use Blizzard, and I'll do a full video on this in the future, maybe like a 5-10 minute video, but we can do it on the layer, we can do it in the reaction phase, and we can do it in the resolution phase. Each one kind of has their pros and cons, and it's going to depend on the matchup and the board state as to which one we want to use, but proper timing of Blizzard is going to be really important to get great value out of the card. There's a lot of times where a blue 0 block can feel horrible, but when Blizzard hits, it's an incredible card, and you just kind of need to know and pick your spots for it. Also, and this is kind of weird, don't be afraid to Blizzard yourself if you need to, if you really want to cycle it out of your hand and you want to draw more cards. Channel Bleak Expanse is my solution to Brutes, and it also incidentally clips 3 of a kind from the Rangers. So Brutes play Bloodrush Bellows, which is they discard a card, and then they're going to draw 2 cards, and their attacks are going to get +2. In response to the play or the Intimidate, if it's Reinhardt, you can play this out and they can't draw cards. Phenomenal, right? We're just negating 2 card draw off of that. A lot of times they go into that, they don't have any more cards in their hand, they're hellbent. So Channel Bleak is phenomenal for that way. As far as 3 of a kind, again, prevents the draw. So they pitch for the 3, they'll Rain Razors, they'll pitch for 3 of a kind. You block this out, you can kind of shut their turn down. If they did Rain Razor beforehand, you're just getting an incredible amount of value. They normally would Rain Razor because 3 of a kind mandates it has to come from Arsenal. If Rain Razor was in hand, they want to clear that out. You can do some smaller hits with it with things like Art of War or Katsu. Let's talk about Art of War first. Art of War, when you cast it, you have to pick your modes. So you'll say, I want +1 to my attack, and I'm going to banish and draw 2 cards. I then get priority to play Channel Bleak, and then my opponent can choose to banish the card or not. They don't have to banish the card. The card banishes a may, but they must pick modes upon casting, so we know we're getting value out of the Bleak here. As far as Katsu goes, it's not as great as people initially think. You have to trigger this before Katsu's trigger or decides whether they want to search or not, right? So it's like Katsu hits, there's a Katsu search trigger. You can respond to it with the Channel Bleak, and then your opponent just says, no, I'm not going to search. Now, sometimes that's good enough because Katsu searching can be insane, but it's not like they get to sacrifice, they pitch the card to search and then you stop it. You have to do it beforehand. So again, Channel Bleak, very powerful card. Some gotchas with it. One of the ones is can't reveal cards. So Rabble always comes in for 5. It feels really bad when you Channel Bleak and then they Rabble you for 5. The other thing is, since you can't reveal, you also can't fuse. If you look at fuse, right, you reveal an ice card from your hand for the ice fusion. So Channel Bleak shuts off fusing for yourself and for your opponent. So some good and some bad there. So anyway, that's what Channel Bleak's in for, and it's powerful enough into Rhinar and probably Bloodrush Leviah that I'm willing to put that in my arsenal, just play like a normal hero, and run out Channel Bleak when I see their Bloodrush Bellows. I'm going to circle back to Exposed to the Elements later. This is probably the weakest card in here. I don't know if I can move it. Nope, sure can't. This Rounds on Me is particularly for Lexi, so its floor is a blue 3-block, which is a great floor. Each hero draws a card. Fine, everyone likes drawing cards. The big advantage to me is until the start of your next turn, attacks the target, you get -1 attack. And mainly we're talking about Bolton Shot. What Bolton Shot says is while this attack has more power than its base, it gains go again. And it consistently or persistently checks that. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait for, again, we're not going to do it on the layer. We're not going to do it in attack resolution. We're going to wait for, attack reaction. We're going to wait for attack resolution, and then we're going to play out this Rounds on Me. That's going to lower the attack of Bolton Shot by 1. Let's assume they Voltaired it, so it only had 1 above. And then it doesn't gain the go again. It would normally gain at the end of that resolution step. Damage has already been set, so you've taken the increased damage amount, but we've passed the reaction step, so they can't snappies you anymore. If they were going to use a buff, they almost always use the buff in the reaction step to ensure the additional damage comes through. So it's a great way we can try to stop a Lexi turn with them having a bunch of cards in hand, which is why this hero draws a card doesn't negatively impact the Lexi player. So a lot of times I'll play this out for 1, I'll pitch a blue, I'll have 2 float, I'll hold priority, send the Waning Moon for 3. If my opponent doesn't fully understand the interaction here, they have to deal with the Waning Moon first before they draw the additional card, and they might not fully process the Bolton Shot is going to lose the go again there. But either way, I want to present them with that 3 points of damage before they draw that additional card here. So anyway, this Rounds on Me, particularly in for Lexi. I don't bring it in for anyone else. I've seen people bring it in for Katsu to shut off the Kadachis. I personally think the Katsu values their drawing a card more than the -1. I could be wrong in that regard. Dromai is another one I see people bring out. If I was expecting a wave of Ash Wings, I might bring it in. But generally, I just don't want to give Dromai another card. So this Round on Me, for me, is mainly in for Lexi. Pajamas, pretty straightforward. If we think you're going to do a bunch of arcane damage and I want to be efficient, I just want Pajamas. It comes in for, I know I said I wasn't going to tell you when it comes in for, but it basically comes in for Rune Blades, and it comes in for the Mirror. So it's just a way to get Arcane Barrier on there, and then we want to be efficient with it. One of the tricks is don't be afraid to Waning Moon yourself on turn 0 in the Mirror to give yourself an Alluvion counter, cycle through some cards, and continue moving along. So like, let's pretend you have a great opening turn. You pitch for an Insidious Chill. You then would pitch to our Waning Moon yourself. I would just pitch 1 to the Arcane Barrier, take 1, put a counter on it, put myself at 35, which sounds like a negative, but it's actually an advantage because we have a couple cards that wake up and we're lower than our opponent, and then I would pass the turnover. If I can fully AB it, I would, but again, don't be afraid to Waning Moon yourself, to get some value out of your Alluvions. We talked about the Goliath Gauntlets. Again, main reason for that Command and Conquer. I do want to highlight again that this deck needs to try to stay under your opponent's life total. So if I'm not cracking the Goliath Gauntlets for Command and Conquer, if I'm cracking it for like a Wounded Bull for 10, I want to be sure that it's towards the end of the game that I'm doing that. Usually like mid to low 20s is about the time I start using Goliath Gauntlets offensively there. Metacarpus Node, again, we talked about its unique interaction with Encase in order to get us to that 4 damage threshold. Otherwise, it's just a nice Arcane Barrier there, right? Between Stormstriders here and here, we're able to get to Arcane Barrier 4, which is usually enough, especially since Iyslander has kind of fallen out of popularity in the meta. And that kind of brings us back to the Exposed to the Elements. This is basically in for the Wizard Mirror, and that's and Oldhim at the time are the only times I would bring this in. There's an argument to bring an Arcane Hood here. I wouldn't argue with you about that. If you really hated Dromai, my teammate Jay brings another Popper in this location. So this is pretty flexible. I happen to like this for blown up Stormstriders, but there's a lot of different cards that this card could be. So that's a high-level overview of this 27-card sideboard here for this Iyslander package. I'll have the deck list down in the comments below on YouTube. Please let me know if this was helpful for you. I've got another couple Iyslander videos coming out. I know Dusk Till Dawn's coming, and everyone's excited about that. I do want to cover some Leviah stuff. I'm been testing some Leviah decks. I have some coverage of me playing on Talishar, but it's real buggy right now. Talishar doesn't have the full rules in for like the, I'm going to call them opulence tokens, but that's not right. The token that gives you go again. So waiting a little bit of time on that. So we'll continue this Iyslander series there. We hope this sideboard guide helped you out there. So until next time, everyone, cheers and happy gaming.